just nice to see them. Hey, good evening. So this year, students tell me that our class impacts their lives. They talk about it with their families. They research topics at home. They buy books. And this probably isn't surprising, since most days, students actually design and lead our seminar-style conversations. Conversations that often end up as heated debates that jump between topics. Spike Lee's influence on film, Afrofuturism, the subtle nuances of Cardi B's politics. And sometimes this can feel a little chaotic, intentionally. See, I needed to design a class where I wasn't the center of knowledge, where there wasn't a clear right answer, where students weren't relying on sentence starters and organizers to frame their thinking. To do this, I decided that this year, students would be my colleagues. We're not peers, but we co-create lessons, checklists, rubrics, scaffolds. At the start of class, I might review our skill focus, introduce a new text, and together, we determine how we're going to meet our goal, how we're going to evaluate success, and why any of this matters. And this means that lessons are often really fluid. And you might think, this is par for the course for an AP or an honors level class. But I don't teach an honors level class. In fact, many of these students, according to test data, are reading at an elementary or middle school level. But this ownership and this transparency, it's allowing students to access college level texts. And this is in part because I've questioned the how and why of my teaching, specifically how and why I use academic scaffolds. And I realize that some people here aren't teachers, so I'll define my jargon. Scaffolds are the supports that teachers put in place to help kids develop new skills. So it might be that cheat sheet of formulas in math class, or the sentence starters in your English class to get you going on that essay, or the word bank at the top of a science worksheet. So I teach in the Boston Public Schools, and each day my task comes down to one thing: closing the achievement gap, ensuring that Black and Hispanic students graduate with the same skill sets as their suburban peers. In the 11th and 12th grade where I teach, I often see kids reading and writing at an elementary or middle school level. And this can feel huge for me and for kids. And in response, we as a school and as a district, we pilot initiatives. And like many of you, each year I work with consultants and outside organizations that gift me books and binders filled with scaffolds, with protocols and organized aimed at closing that gap. And for years, I relied on these games and these worksheets to engage kids and to teach kids and to move the bar. And I have to admit, we had a ton of fun moving around the room and passing giant sheets of paper, but the bar wasn't moving. The gap wasn't closing. And so a while back, I came to a realization that many of us, teachers in urban education, we've been trained to over-scaffold our classrooms. We've been rewarded for accidentally removing the risk-taking and the exploration and the ownership that are essential to learning. And the impact is real. See, we've taught students to play student. We too often tell them there's one right answer, one way to find it. What I'm teaching matters because you might need this someday in college. And for many kids, school can be reduced to 6 hours of filling in blanks. Let me give you an example. Earlier this year, I asked a group of seniors to write a response to Childish Gambino's This Is America. It's a symbol-heavy music video. And our class conversations were at a college level. And yet students' writing was multiple grade levels below where it should be. So I photocopied everyone's work, distributed it, and we were going to locate trends. We were going to work together to do this. And a few minutes into this kid, I'll call Sam, he stood up, he was in the corner of the room, and he blurted out, "Oh my God, we all wrote the same thing." And see, in that moment, he saw what I already knew. My students have been trained. See, they take a prompt. Is Othello a tragic hero? And they flip it. Othello is a tragic hero. And they find a piece of evidence, often somewhat randomly, and then they summarize it. And you see, this formula, it got you the minimum score needed to pass the MCAS. And so Sam, literally standing up, he welled up, he got emotional. And he said, I'm a senior and I don't know how to write a damn paragraph. Listen, if we want students to stop playing student, if we want them to become mathematicians and scientists and academics and activists, then we need to answer a few questions. Why are we over-scaffolding urban education? Why do we insist on putting content before process? Why do we, as individual educators, think we know better than our students how and why they learn? It's not that scaffolds are bad, but the way that many of us in this room are using them, it's inadvertently perpetuating inequity. For too many teachers, scaffold's a noun. It's that collection of formulas and sentence starters and organizers that remove a lot of the thinking from learning. But in the 21st century classroom, the thing that we're still imagining that doesn't quite yet exist, scaffold has to be a verb, a fluid short-term action. See, scaffolds, they have to be co-created with kids through metacognitive and transparent interactions. And the scaffolds that kids create on day one, they have to be internalized and released before day 180. Here's what I know. When we have ownership in our destiny, we put more effort into achieving that destiny. This is as true for you and me as it is for the kids in my classroom. And so this year I decided I'm going to throw out a lot of those scaffolds. I'm going to co-create with kids. I'm going to put process before content. And it's been really messy. And there have been many days where I've really missed my giant packets with their beautiful boxes and blanks and sentence starters. And kids have felt this too. Early in the year, there was frustration. Kids just wanted to know the right answer. They craved those boxes and blanks. But we have found a lot of success in co-creation. And I'm going to give you one example. So, in September and October, I wanted students to have an evidence-based conversation. And I wanted them to take notes and create new ideas while they were talking with their peers. A Socratic seminar. Yet students realized they didn't know how or why to take notes without a graphic organizer or guiding questions. So we had to determine the purpose of notes. To do this, we watched Project Runway, a reality show about fashion design. And we studied Tim Gunn, the design consultant, as he gave notes to contestants. See, Tim would come onto the floor, he'd come up to a mannequin with a garment on it, and he would summarize. And he would question, and he would make predictions. And then he'd create a few new ideas, and he'd share it with the contestant. And using this as our model, we determined that notes need to be useful and authentic. And then we practiced. Each day we'd take notes. And students would determine how and why they're going to capture their own thinking and that of their peers. And each day I'd photocopy these notes. And as a class, we'd look at them and evaluate them and decide, are they meeting our co-created criteria? And at the end of a lesson, we'd step back and I'd say, so is this working? Are we meeting our goal? What do we want to try different tomorrow? And in doing this, of course, this was only in part about note-taking. Students were designing their scaffolds. They were determining the how and why of their learning. In a small way, they were taking hold of their academic destiny. While all this was happening, we were practicing with note-taking. A group of educators from around the district came in and they observed one of these classes. And at the end of the student-led conversation, a teacher raised his hand and said, what's it been like to learn like this? And a young woman who I admire so much, her name is Genesis, she boldly, confidently raised her hand and she said, I feel like I have finally escaped worksheet jail. And I looked at this table covered in notes and annotated text and secondary materials, all designed by kids. And I realized in this moment, these students weren't playing student. They'd become academics. Listen, this hasn't been flawless. A lot of lessons have fallen flat. And I have colleagues who teach in the sciences who say, content comes first. And I have close friends who teach for the MCAS and they say, I don't have time to co-create and reflect. And they're right. But I also know that 1 month from tonight, exactly to the hour, Sam graduates. And I know statistically, he doesn't have the skills to survive the first year of college. He just doesn't. And I know that this year, I feel like I finally stopped playing teacher. Listen, if we really want to close the achievement gap, we have to be willing to take some risks and question how and why we teach. Co-create with kids. Break them out of worksheet jail. Stop telling them to fill in the blank, and instead invite them to take risks and explore and own the how and why of their thinking as they work in those blanks. Thank you.